estimated 500 children die at the hands of their parents every year in the United States. The 2001 tragic death of Corey Micciolo brought this statistic close to home. Corey Travis Micciolo, born May 1, 2014, died April 2, 2021 at Southern Ocean Medical Center in Stafford Township, New Jersey. Corey enjoyed playing football, Roblox, a video game, and had an interest in our solar system, planets, and space. He loved art and drawing and playing with his friends in the park and the trampoline park. Corey met his father, Christopher Gregor, when he was 5 years old, and a year later, he was dead. Brianna Micciolo had Corey when she was 17. She got pregnant after being sexually assaulted by Chris, 21 at the time, with whom she had never had a relationship with. Chris's paternity remained unconfirmed until Corey was 4, when a paternity test prompted by application for food stamps and health insurance was mandated. Chris first came into Corey's life in September 2019 when he was just 5 years old, and Brianna had no say in the matter after a judge granted Chris his request for partial custody. Brianna admitted she used meth to suppress her emotions in her early 20s. This allowed Chris to gain residential custody of Corey in early 2020. Chris brought Corey to his family's home to live with him. An October 28, 2020 court order granted Brianna and Chris joint custody. Brianna had completed a drug program, worked hard to get clean because she hated living without her son. Chris received primary residential custody while Brianna was allotted parenting time. Chris Gregor, born 1992, graduated from Monroe Township High School, where he was an honor student and an all-state defensive lineman who played for the school's 2009 Group 3 state championship football team. Chris was selected to be part of the district Heroes and Cool Kids mentorship program for middle schoolers. After graduation, he briefly attended Wesleyan University. Chris ultimately received his undergraduate, a Bachelor of Arts in Psychology, at the University of Arizona. He was studying for a master's degree at Johns Hopkins University School of Education. The next several years, he job hopped across Florida, New Jersey, and Maryland, working brief stints at a different range of gigs, including a crisis hotline counselor, realtor, math teacher, and sales associate for the NHL's Tampa Bay Lightning. At the time of his arrest, he was a real estate agent at Red Door Estate in New Jersey. Chris racked up more than a half a dozen criminal charges in Baltimore between August 2017 and April 2018, including assault, robbery, and destruction of property. During the course of the next year or so, Brianna noticed bruises and/or lacerations on Corey's body during her visits. Fearing Chris was abusing Corey, Brianna filed several reports to New Jersey Child Protective Services to get Corey away from Chris, but no one would listen. So Brianna made sure to document any injuries and file a report with DCPP. Brianna first contacted DCPP in September 2019 when Corey came back from a visit with a busted lip and swollen face. This was shortly after Chris and Corey first met. Corey would not say what happened. Chris claimed he accidentally kicked Corey while playing soccer. She made additional reports in April 2020 and in July 2020, and one final report on April 2nd, 2021, the day Corey died. Brianna had made over 100 calls to DCPP in a span of 20 months and filed multiple complaints alleging that Chris had been beating their son. She even submitted photographs to DCPP showing Corey with bruises, scrapes, black eyes, and what she identified as a bite mark. In one of her communications to DCPP, she asked, "Is someone going to do something about this abuse, or are we going to allow his father to continue to hurt him?" DCPP responded by sending caseworkers to interview Corey, but always while he was at his father's home. Brianna emailed DCPP after one of those visits telling the caseworker that Corey was afraid of Chris and he was afraid to talk in front of him. March 20, 2021, Chris was upset when Brianna returned late with Corey. He threatened to reduce time from a future visit and told her to drop Corey off at the gym at his apartment complex. Shortly after, surveillance footage shows Chris and Corey entering the Atlanta Heights Clubhouse Fitness Center in his apartment complex. Corey is seen inside stepping onto a treadmill alone and running for several minutes. Chris would make Corey run on the treadmill during his workouts because he said he was fat. Chris is at the other part of the gym working out. Footage captured Chris walking up to the treadmill to increase the speed and raise the incline a little at a time, but the sudden changes were too much for little Corey's legs, causing him to fall down multiple times and slide off the treadmill. Corey could be seen falling off the treadmill in a total of 6 times, and each time Chris picked him up and instructed him to keep running. At one point, Chris lifted Corey and tossed him back onto the treadmill, which forced his legs to fold backwards as Chris clamped his teeth into Corey's head. evening, Brianna picked Corey up from school and noticed injuries on his face. He also had cuts on his body, including one on his chest that looked like a scrape. Corey told Brianna that Chris made him run on the treadmill really fast because he was mad, and while running on the treadmill, he fell and hit his head. Brianna contacted DCPP and told them that her son had been forced to run on a treadmill by his father and was physically picked up every time he fell and placed back on the treadmill. She also informed DCPP that there was a video to prove the abuse. Brianna took Corey to a local hospital that same day. He received x-rays and blood work to ensure he did not have any internal injuries. March 31st, 2021, Brianna filed an order to show cause seeking emergency custody of Corey while DCPP investigated her latest allegation of abuse. During the hearing, due to the findings submitted by DCPP about the treadmill video, the court did not find Corey was in any danger or harm, and a temporary modification of the parties' custody arrangement was denied. DCPP had seen the video, and a caseworker told police that he photographed investigated bruising on Corey 6 days after the alleged incident. But yet, the judge denied Brianna to obtain emergency custody. Brianna felt that the more her allegations were ignored, the bolder Chris became in his abuse of Corey. April 1st, 2021, Brianna used her visitation to take Corey to the hospital to see a child abuse specialist. Corey first told the pediatrician that the injuries to his chest, arm, and forehead came from his dad teaching him to throw a football. Later, Corey admitted that he got more bruises when he fell from a treadmill. She identified 14 areas of bruises and scratches in various stages of healing distinguished by color. Corey became tearful when he asked the pediatrician to promise not to tell anyone what he said. The pediatrician, who also spoke with the DCPP worker assigned to the case, referred Brianna to Jersey Shore Medical Center. Instead, Brianna signs Corey out of community against medical advice when they offered to transport him to Jersey Shore. Instead, she went to a closer hospital because she was worried about returning Corey to his father late. It was after midnight before Corey was dismissed from the hospital, so Brianna took Corey back to her house after she could not reach Chris. April 2nd, 2021, Brianna dropped Corey off at Chris's home about 9 a.m. It was the last time she would ever see her son alive. Chris was angry because Brianna returned Corey to his custody 14 hours late. Around 3:30 p.m., Corey woke up from a nap feeling nauseated, stumbling around and slurring his words. When Corey began to have seizures, Chris called Brianna for Corey's insurance card, saying Corey was lethargic, sleeping excessively, vomiting, and not feeling well, and that he was taking him to the hospital, but he would not tell her which one. Brianna started to call hospitals to locate her son and even called her local police department for help. Later that evening, about 3 hours after Corey had died, the police stopped at her home to deliver the news that Corey had died about an hour after Chris brought his limp body into the emergency room. Within minutes of Corey's death, Brianna called Chris 3 times, but he did not answer. She was desperately trying to find out which hospital he had taken Corey to. She couldn't even spend his last moments with her son. His heart stopped twice, and his injuries were so severe that he suffered a seizure during a CT scan, forcing medical staff to take emergency measures to save his life. Corey was found to have died due to chronic child abuse, including blunt force injuries to his chest and stomach and a laceration to his heart. Chris left Corey's hospital room more than 10 minutes before he died, and he never returned, leaving Corey to die surrounded by strangers. Surveillance footage showed Chris walking out of the hospital to his car and then driving away. Within the hour, he texted his parents that he wouldn't be back for a while and to take care of his dog. The defense attorney argued Chris left because he was grieving and wanted to be alone. But prosecutors suggest he was trying to flee because he knew what he had done to Corey. Chris then called the DCCP hotline and told a caseworker that Brianna had made false child abuse allegations against him more than a dozen times in the past, and he was worried that caseworkers would take the latest allegations seriously. Chris expressed his concerns that Brianna was coaching Corey to say he had been abused by his father. He wanted it documented that when Brianna dropped Corey off at 9 a.m. that morning, one of the first two things Corey said was, "I don't want to go with my mom anymore. She's going to try to take me away from you." And he also said, "Mom told me to lie, and I had to." This was Chris' first step in covering his ass. A little more than an hour after Corey died, Chris searched online for answers to the questions, "Can your phone be tracked in airplane mode?" and "Can my car be tracked?" The next day, he searched the internet for answers to questions about what would cause a rise in blood sugar and white blood cells. Could internal bleeding raise blood sugar levels? And how does gastrointestinal bleeding happen? And can such a bleed be slow? The day after that, Chris went back to the internet and saw answers on the internet to another question. If there was a murder determination from an autopsy, how long to file charges? Chris's phone showed he was moving away from the hospital for 24 hours with no attempts to return. Cellular data indicated that his phone pinged locations from New Jersey to the southwestern corner of Arkansas from the evening Corey died and over the next couple days. Ocean County Sheriff's Crime Scene Unit secured the scene at Chris's apartment since it was the last place where Corey was before his death. A strong smell of vomit came from Corey's bedroom. Soiled clothes were found underneath a plastic bag in a garbage can. These included Corey's sweatshirt that appeared wet from vomit, as well as his underwear and jeans that were soiled with fecal material. April 4th, 2021, Easter Sunday. Chris was eventually located after police stopped him in Tennessee for speeding in a construction zone. Chris can be heard telling officers that his son had died. He tells them that it wasn't clear how his son had died, saying they didn't know. They thought it was some internal bleeding. He didn't have any bruising on him. He told the police Brianna caused Corey's death and that she was a special kind of dirtbag, and told the officers his boy would still be alive if she wasn't a drug addict. The officers questioned Chris repeatedly after his route of travel from New Jersey through Arkansas and almost to Texas. Chris told police he had driven for 20 hours straight and had made it to somewhere near the Arkansas-Texas state line when he turned around and drove another 5 hours to Nashville. There, he said he ate dinner, had a drink, got a hotel room, called his female friend who was flying to meet him, and then went to sleep. He told officers at one point he was thinking about going to see his brother who lives in California. The officers also questioned Chris about why he picked his female friend up at the airport. Because the flights lined up where she would get in at a particular time, he responded. "I didn't check the flights out. I didn't question why. I just said okay." He told them the woman flew down from New Jersey to meet him because she was concerned about him making the drive back home by himself because he had already driven 13 hours. "Were you trying to cross the border?" the officer asked him. "No, even if I was, I wouldn't be headed in the direction I'm in," Chris said, telling them he was now heading straight home. Police eventually let Chris go, but they took his car and cell phone as evidence. His father then arranged to get Chris a rental car so he could drive home to New Jersey. On July 7, 2021, 3 months after Corey's death, police charged Chris with endangering the welfare of a child due to the treadmill video. He was released on a consequence of the New Jersey bail reform. Under the new risk-based system, Access to money does not determine pretrial detainment. Defendants with a serious risk of danger or flight can be detained pending trial. Low-risk defendants who can afford bail will be released. On April 3, 2021, an Ocean County medical examiner who performed an autopsy on Corey's body issued a finding on the cause of death: blunt force injuries with cardiac and liver contusions with acute inflammation and syphilis. However, he did not rule on the manner of death. Rather, he deemed it undetermined. It wasn't until a consulting forensic pathologist reviewed the case in September of 2021 that the manner of death was determined to be homicide. Dr. Thomas Andrew had been chief medical examiner for the state of New Hampshire for over 20 years, believes Corey suffered an acute traumatic injury to the heart 4 to 12 hours before his death, which was when he was in his father's care. Dr. Andrew found what he described as evidence of chronic abuse, including blunt impact injuries of the chest and stomach with lacerations of the heart, left pulmonary contusion, laceration and contusion of the liver. Chris was then arrested on murder charges on March 9, 2022. At trial, Chris's defense team, who tried to paint Brianna as a less than ideal parent herself, argued that Corey died from a rapidly spreading infection and not from injuries sustained when he repeatedly fell off of a treadmill. The defense attorney also addressed the part of the gym video where Chris appeared to bite his son's head. The father didn't bite the boy, and there was no physical evidence that he did, he told the jurors. The prosecution called a pediatric infectious disease specialist at Cooper University Medical Center in Camden, who testified that Corey had no signs of pneumonia or other infections in his body. Also, none of the 3 doctors who saw Corey in the 24 hours before his death found any evidence of an infection. Prior to the start of the trial, the defense attorney attempted to have the endangerment charges separated from the murder charges. His co-counsel argued before Superior Court Judge Guy P. Ryan that prior acts of abuse should be ruled as inadmissible as they were unduly prejudicial. The defense attorney also attempted to have the case dismissed for insufficient evidence after his presentation to the jury. Judge Ryan denied both motions. Defense counsel announced intentions to appeal the case immediately after the verdict. The defense team challenged the prosecution's arguments and brought in a forensic pathologist to testify, who claimed that CPR performed on Corey in the emergency room may have caused the blunt force trauma. The prosecution said that CPR was not performed for the full 49 minutes. There were breaks in the life-saving measures when Corey regained a pulse, but the CPR resumed after his heart stopped again. During closing arguments, the prosecution broke down the treadmill video in sections. She pointed out that Chris held up 2 fingers, which she submitted bore significant meaning. Brianna was 2 hours late in returning Corey, and he was being punished as a result. Led to the inference that Corey was being punished by revealing what was being done to him, the further abuse on the date of his death. The prosecution stated that Chris didn't spend his son's dying moments with him, but instead left the hospital. If your son just passed away and you don't know why, the last thing you would ever do is leave, Linto said. The defense attorney said Chris left the hospital because he was grieving. His 6-year-old kid just died, he told the jury. He left to be by himself, to grieve, to cry, to be upset. Chris invoked his right not to testify on his own behalf, which his defense attorney pointed out should not be viewed as a admission of his guilt. He maintained his innocence from the start of the case and turned down a 30-year plea offer when he was first charged. He also lost a critical character witness when prosecutors learned he had been coaching his mother on her testimony from his jail cell. Caroline Gregor had been expected to take the stand in her son's defense. She appeared before the judge once jurors had been dismissed to determine what parts of her testimony would be admissible in the case. The prosecution made it clear that either Chris or his mother took the stand, they would be questioned about the transcript of the jail phone call. The defense attorney then addressed the court and said that after receiving a recording and transcript of the call, the prosecutor's statements about the discussion between mother and son was very accurate. Therefore, the defense attorney did not use Ms. Gregor as a witness. The jury found Chris Gregor guilty of aggravated manslaughter and endangering the welfare of a child. They rejected the more serious murder charge against him. Aggravated manslaughter can carry a prison term of 10 to 30 years. Judge Gregor stated he had read numerous letters praising Chris's character and numerous victim impact letters. He said that those praising Chris talk about how he gave up his career in special education to come home to be a father, and the behavior on the treadmill was a way of teaching Corey, if you fall, you get back up. But we saw, Judge Ron countered, a picture is worth 1,000 words, but that video is worth 10,000 words, he said. Christopher Gregor, 32, was sentenced to 25 years in New Jersey State Prison, 20 years for the charge of aggravated manslaughter, and 5 years for the charge of endangering the welfare of a child. If he was convicted of murder, Gregor could have faced life in prison. His sentence is subject to the No Early Release Act, which requires that those convicted of a violent crime in the state of New Jersey to serve 85% of their sentence before becoming eligible for parole.
Mr. Gregor, sir, is there anything you'd like to say about yourself or your case?
Yes, Your Honor.
Please go ahead.
Just want to say thank you for the opportunity to speak today. And Brianna, we haven't talked since Corey passed away. With everything that has been said, I just want to tell you that I'm sorry that you lost Corey. He was, to say simply, the best. I know we'll miss him for the rest of our lives. And the 2 years that I knew Corey were very difficult, but they were the greatest years of my life. And he was a happy, energetic, loving, radiant young boy who flourished in his life in all aspects the last year of his life. And sorry. That will be how I remember him. And Corey, wherever you are, I just want to say that I'm proud of you and everything that you did. The last months of his life, us three, Brianna, Corey, and me, we spent more time together than apart. All those hikes and walks, trips to the beach, time spent playing football and all the other sports, going to Sky Zone, the park, the playground, sledding, and all of that, I saw how much Brianna loved Corey, how much he loved her, and how well we could co-parent together. Those memories and all the good times, they'll be what I remember, and they helped me get through the tough days. And I hope that they can help you too, Brianna. I'm sorry you believe I could have done this to our son, and it pains me to know that you view my actions those months together as ingenuine, that I could have hurt the most important person in my life. What happened on March 20th was inexcusable. To you, Brianna, your family, and mine, I want to apologize that you had to see Corey treated that way. He never deserved it. I understand this single moment will overshadow all of the others, but it's not representative of who I am, who Corey was, and his relationship with me and him. I want to assure you that on April 2nd, I did nothing to cause Corey's passing. I didn't hurt my son. I loved him and I still do. I regret not bringing him to the hospital sooner. I didn't know how sick he was. I didn't know. I just thought he was tired. And And whether you believe Dr. Bodden or Dr. Andrews' version of the events, the outcome is still the same. Corey is gone. He had so much to give this world, and he still can. What we do in his memory, for his memory, things that he would want us to do, that's all we have now. To the court staff, sheriff officers, to the jury, and to you, Your Honor, thank you for being professional through this whole process. I understand you have a job to do today, Your Honor. Sentence me for the crimes I've been convicted of today. I ask that you please consider all of the evidence presented in and out of this courtroom when making your decision today. I ask you to sentence me fairly, taking into consideration my entire life, and not just based on the 12 days. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments, sir.
Many advocates in Corey's family asked for Chris to serve the full sentence of 40 years, but Judge Guy Ron said it would not stand in an appeals court due to Chris's lack of criminal history.
Your Honor, my name is Micciolo, and I appear before you today not only as a grieving mother, but also an advocate for justice. On behalf of my son Corey, I stand here before you to plead for justice that Corey rightfully deserves, and to press for the maximum sentence of Christopher Gregor, whose actions have inflicted irreparable harm in our lives. For you to fully understand the gravity of the situation, I will flash back to the July of 2013. This day marks the beginning of a traumatic journey defined by manipulation, abuse, and ultimately an unspeakable loss. At 16, I first met the defendant, who was 21 at the time. He proceeded to feed me drugs, alcohol, and took complete advantage of me, which led to the conception of Corey. From day one of my pregnancy, I knew I would keep Corey, regardless of the way he was conceived. Corey didn't ask to be brought into this world, and I knew I owed it to him to bring him into this world with unconditional love. Corey was and still is my life, my world, and my everything. I would also like to speak about my past, which I am not 100% proud of. You heard a lot about it throughout the trial, and so did a lot of the world. It was very upsetting for that to come out because I've worked extremely hard for many years to be where I am today. I admit I abused drugs, but during the trial it was made out that for some reason my son deserved to be killed because his mom was a drug addict. That is absolutely disgusting. I stand here today, clean and sober, and I know Corey would be so proud of me. Unfortunately, my son is no longer here to tell his story, so I'm here to be his voice and tell his story along with all the others sitting in the gallery who have continued to stand by me. Not once have you seen the defendant shed a tear for Corey in the last 3.5 years since he killed him, and today was fake. I don't believe a word he said, and I don't accept any apologies. He has no remorse for any of the actions he committed, and his only remorse, like you saw today, was for himself because he got caught and convicted. Another reason I could think of is, everything he had done to Corey was done out of spite towards me. Another reason I could think of is he's sick in the head and used Corey as his punching bag. On April 2nd of 2021, it was not the first time that he abused Corey, but it was the last time. He never had an ounce of love for Corey. And to the defendant, Corey was just an inconvenience in his life. He never hugged him. He never praised him. He never told him he was proud of him or that he did a good job. He punished Corey every chance that he could get, and I cannot even begin to imagine what my son dealt with behind closed doors with this man. On April 2nd of 2021, I hesitantly dropped Corey off at the defendant's home, which is a mistake that will haunt me for the rest of my life. I kissed my son goodbye unknowingly for the last time. I wish I knew what was going to happen and I would never let him go. At 3 p.m. the same day, I received a phone call from the defendant where he stated Corey was very sick and he was taking him to the hospital, and then hung up on me after he asked for my insurance card. As an extremely concerned mother, I called him back with no answer and continued to do so along with texts for hours to find out where Corey was and what was going on. For those few hours, my mother and I called every hospital in the area with no luck. The very last hospital finally said he was there. Then there was a knock on the door. It was our local police there to tell me Corey had passed away. My healthy 6-year-old boy who was just alive and well with me a few hours ago is dead. My heart dropped and my whole body collapsed from the shock that took over my whole body. I was unable to breathe. My mind was racing, and I felt like I was no longer inside my body. All I remember is screaming that they had the wrong child because Corey was fine this morning. I actually convinced myself that it wasn't him and they had the wrong kid for a while. My next question was, where is Chris? I needed to know what happened, and he was nowhere to be found until the next day, when I found out he was in Tennessee. No one was able to tell me what happened to Corey except Corey died at the hospital. I couldn't even see my son until a week later at his funeral because his body was evidence. But the defendant took away my chance to say goodbye to Corey while he was passing away, and not once did he pick up the phone he was using to converse with many of his girlfriends, to call 911, to seek medical attention, which could have potentially saved Corey's life. Instead, he allowed Corey to suffer silently for hours. Once he realized how bad it was, he threw him in the car and then proceeded to drive 15 minutes to the hospital. He slowly walked Corey into the hospital with no sense of urgency, even when he knew how bad his condition was. I fully believe that if we took Corey to the hospital as soon as he received the lethal blow, he could still be here today. There were many steps he could have taken to save my son's life. Instead, he sat home and let Corey slowly die for hours. Every day since April 2nd has been an absolute living nightmare, and it is now the new reality for me to replay Corey's horrific death repeatedly in my head. It's the first thing I think about when I wake up in the morning, and the last thing I think about before I fall asleep at night. I dread normal conversation with people, because I always get asked, how many kids do you have? I say 2, and they follow up asking how old are they. That's when the grief sinks in, and I have to tell them my 6-year-old was killed by his father. It is such an indescribable feeling when I found out I was pregnant with my daughter. A sense of guilt was all I could feel. I wanted more kids, but how do I love another child? Is it fair to Corey? That is all I could think about. Now I know this is not true, and I love my daughter with all my heart, but I always will feel an emptiness, no matter how many children I have. My new reality is explaining to my daughter what happened to her big brother and why is he not here. I live in fear every day, every second of the day, that something will happen to my daughter, and I will lose her too. It's a horrible feeling, and it causes me such bad anxiety. I take her to the cemetery to see Corey every weekend, and at 1.5 years old, she knows where Corey is, buried. It is every week. It is heartbreaking. She sits and plays with the cars and toys we left there for him. I live in a nightmare, and I would never wish this feeling or how I must live on my worst enemy. Throughout everything he did to Corey, Corey still loved him. He looked up to you, and he still wanted to be, I'm sorry. And he still wanted him to be like a real father who treated him like a son. Instead of being a good role model for Corey, he decided to beat him to death. Why? Were you jealous of him? Did you hate me so much that you took it out on Corey? Were you abused as a child? Not that that's a good excuse, because you could have overcome it and became the protector he needed as a child, but instead you became a killer. There was no amount of love in his actions, and only a disturbing amount of hate. It seems like he hated Corey simply because I loved him, and he felt deprived of that love. He couldn't even control himself for long, because after the first visit with my son, he started abusing him. My son didn't even know him, and he was beating him. He was abusing him from the first time. I thank God. I hate you for not letting me say goodbye to my son, but I thank God your face is not the last one he saw. I'm sorry. What this monster did was pathetic, disgusting, and I wish him nothing but the worst. One could only hope that karma comes to him quickly. After all he's done, you would hope he'd admit what he's done, but no. Instead of grieving, I had to fight for justice for 3 long years. Go to trial just to relive everything. I had to see that video that I never wanted to see. I didn't have to see it until 2 weeks before this trial. I went 3 years without seeing it. Oh, I'm sorry. Just for you to be found guilty anyway. What was the point of that? Just to make it worse for us? Are you that crazy that you convinced yourself you didn't do this? I hate you. I will never forgive you. And I'm going to skip that one. You have stolen my full potential at happiness. And I will never have my son back. My family will never feel whole again. My daughter will never get to meet her brother. And my boyfriend will never get to be the father that the defendant should have been to our son. He took my whole world away from me. He has shown and proven to be that special kind of dirtbag he claimed I was. Your Honor, all this monster had to do was say he did not want to be a father. No one would have made him. I would have happily continued to raise my son alone with the help of my family. He had many opportunities not to do this to him. He is in this current situation due to his own actions, and every day he will have to live with this. He deserves nothing less than to experience the pain, suffering, and isolation that he inflicted on Corey. I hope that every moment he spends in prison is haunted by the torment of knowing he killed my child. I fear when Christopher Gregor gets out of jail, whenever that is, he will come after my family and I again. I fear for our lives. His twisted mind truly thinks that I caused all this and that he's in jail because of me, even though he's here because he killed him. I truly believe if he ever gets out and gets the opportunity, he will kill me. Your Honor, Corey should be going into 5th grade in September, hanging out with his friends, playing sports and enjoying his life. Instead, he will never experience finding his first girlfriend, graduating high school, falling in love, driving a car, getting married, or having kids. Christopher robs him of his entire future, and Corey could have easily lived until he was 80 years old. He stole over 70 years from Corey and thousands of memories he could have made. I will never see my son again. I miss him and I love him so much. There are countless reasons Christopher deserves the maximum sentence. He rejected what I considered a generous plea deal, which shows how selfish and ignorant he is as a person. I beg you to not allow this injustice to continue, and he must face the full consequences of his actions. Thank you for allowing me to speak, Your Honor.
Thank you for your comments, ma'am.
In the wake of her son's death, Brianna filed a wrongful death suit against the state of New Jersey Department of Child Protection and Permanency. She alleged in her civil suit that her son Corey might still be alive had the agency and caseworkers adequately, properly, and fully investigated the reports of abuse she made concerning her son and his father. She accuses the agency of neglect, reckless, and demonstrated unreasonable conduct in the suit, and is seeking both wrongful death and survivor damages, having filed the suit on behalf of Corey's estate. This lawsuit will not bring my son back, but it will hold DCPP accountable for him losing his life to a monster. They had an obligation to protect my son. They didn't do that. They are at fault for my son's death, as well as the person who physically murdered him. Bye.